corporate position. It may be any sphere, any one of the hats that you wear in your life. It could be an academic journey that you're on, and you have to lead either a group of students. You have to be a group leader. You have to be probably a student council leader, any one of those things, right? We have joining us this afternoon quantum transformational psychologist. He's a management consultant, ideator, a whole bunch of other things. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Leahcim Semaj.
My pleasure.
Hi, Doc. How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome, awesome. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. We want to start off with, first of all, there is this saying that leaders are born and they're not made. What is your view on that?
Not true. Not true. Not true at all.
I can imagine you would,
right,
you would subscribe to that.
In fact, what's a more basic truism is that anyone can learn to be a leader, but nobody can teach you to be a leader. It's so much, I won't teach to be a leader. No. If you want to, you can learn to be a leader by observing, by understanding, by doing all the things required to prepare yourself to lead other people. You start by leading yourself, yes.
Start by leading yourself. That's where you start.
Absolutely.
All right. And how do you do that? What does that look like? What does leading yourself look like?
Well, let's make a distinction between management and leadership, because people confuse the two. Management is about things being predictable and consistent, homeostasis. So for example, the person who manages the house, make sure that things are where they're supposed to be, make sure the shopping list was made, make sure the helper got what she's supposed to get. Things are predictable and controlled and consistent. Now, when things get out of whack, that's where you need leadership, because leadership shapes and designs the future and prepares people for the future. So, for example, now, back to the start of the house then, household before you get to the corporate. The household,
all right.
Within the household, they will talk about the kitchen and the yard and all of that and the food shopping and so on. That's management. But my daughter will go to college. That requires leadership, because now you're talking about the future. So many people talk about that but do nothing about it. What are the things you're doing? If you want your daughter to go to college, how are you preparing her now to start to sacrifice and to study and to engage in futuristic planning and also making delay gratification? What are you doing with yourself to start putting aside a little money, making sure that you're ready?
Doc, you were breaking up just a little bit there. We lost you.
Yeah, I'm saying, what are you doing to prepare her for the future and also preparing yourself?
The leadership is more directed toward outcomes.
Exactly, and more future outcomes. And when other people are involved, getting them to work together for the common good. That's the role of a leader, getting persons to work together for the common good, for something that doesn't yet exist.
You say inspiring now, inspiring.
Absolutely, because without inspiration, there can be no leadership. Management doesn't necessarily require inspiration, because management, we know what the rules are. You just want to ensure that the rules are followed, the consequences are in place, the boxes are checked. But leadership requires inspiration, making sure that people are committed and convinced that it can happen, that they're going to make it happen.
All right. What would you say are the key qualities of a good leader? Key qualities.
You start with integrity. I must start with integrity and honesty, consistency. Because, look, if we're talking about leadership involves things that have not yet happened. And if we can't trust you, if your word can't be trusted, if you don't keep your word, if you aren't consistent to do what you say you're going to do today, how should we trust you with tomorrow? So those are some of the most important traits. Consistency, trustworthy, integrity, all of those kinds of things. To be a leader, you don't have to be the brightest person in the group, But
Yes.
you must be
That
able
is
to
true.
identify the bright people and reward them and engage them and make
Hmm.
sure you can motivate them and all of that. But you don't have to be the brightest person in the group.
Right. So as a leader, you don't need to know everything. You just need to have the people around you who can get the job done and inspire them
Absolutely.
to do so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Select the
All
right
right.
people, make sure that they're engaged and that you keep up with them to make sure, and it's an ongoing thing. You don't you don't do it one day and it gets done. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, there's a saying, that many times in Jamaica we're overmanaged but underled. You know, management,
Overmanaged and
overmanaged.
underpaid.
You manage this and you manage that and so on. But leadership is about sacrifice. Leadership, you go in front.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership, you set the example. All of these
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things, and in many instances we're lacking. Leadership, you accept the consequences. You accept the responsibility. All of these
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. If you notice that we hardly have a culture where people accept responsibility. How many leaders have
Oh Lord.
accepted? Well, let's not even start raising those questions because
That one is a tough one, Doc.
yeah. So whether in the
Yeah.
political sphere, in the business sphere, and so on,
Mhm.
that leadership comes with responsibility, and with
Mhm.
responsibility it comes with consequence and action,
Mhm.
and to make sure that your word is your bond.
Absolutely. And speaking of word being a bond, Doc, let's talk about the communication part of it.
Abs- you can't over communicate because that is the one interesting contrast. They say that managers can command. Huh? Because by virtue, I'm the manager, I'm in charge, so that I can command you to do this, do that, do that. But leaders have to
Mhm.
communicate. And there's a big difference. Communicate by all means necessary, by all means possible, and you do so often. So it's not just sending
Right.
out an email. It's not just sending out an email.
Mhm.
It's conversations, it's one on one, whatever you need to do to get the information across. But communication is
Yes.
key for leadership.
Right. I heard you use the word command earlier, Doc, and that brings us now to leadership styles. There is the autocratic style. There's the style that almost comes across as bullying. And then there's the one who is more charismatic, who is able to convince you of the reasons why we need to go the direction we're going. Let's talk a little bit about that.
We have been moving away from that kind of contrast because there are very few situations that demand one type of approach to leadership. What we'll be
Hmm.
talking about more now,
Combination we need.
not just situational leadership,
Ah.
situational, because sometimes it's required for you to direct people. In an emergency, you don't have time to debate and discuss and how you feel about it now. In an emergency, in a crisis, everybody out.
Hmm. No.
Exactly, right? But then there are other
Yes.
styles. There are other situations that call for, all right, let's discuss the options. Let us see
Hmm.
how would you do it? How would you do it? Let's work it out together. But there's
Hmm.
also an option where you literally you outsource it completely. You assign somebody else to you look, you take care of this. You deal with it.
Hmm.
But that's your
Hmm.
decision. You as a leader, if you now outsource something, if you defer something to somebody, if you delegate to the wrong person, you have to accept the responsibility because you're the one that delegated it to the wrong person. So it is
Hmm.
on you. So the notion of just being um, authoritarian or being laissez-faire, you have to
Hmm.
know how to shift gears. Know
Hmm.
when you need to be firm, know when you need to be soft, so that we don't use that kind of option anymore. Anyone who is only one and not the
Hmm.
other runs into problem. Because if you don't know when to be firm, you're going to create a lot of problems. If you don't know when to
Hmm.
be engaging and when to allow people the leeway when they can actually
Hmm.
make mistakes and try things and so on, then you're going to run
Hmm.
into problems also. But the
Right.
important thing is being able to know when to zig and when to zag.
Okay. It sounds like one of the points I was looking at earlier that spoke to the emotional intelligence and the need for leaders to have emotional intelligence and to work on building that.
Absolutely important. There's a saying that from the management standpoint, that IQ is what gets you hired, but EQ, emotional intelligence, is what gets you promoted because you know how to read people emotionally. You know the consequences of the emotions. You know what to say. In fact, they say knowledge is knowing what to say, but wisdom is knowing when to say it. And one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, is that people will forget what you said or what you did, but never how you made them feel. So that how you communicate this. Go ahead.
How you communicate it is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. That rubbish is the whole notion of what emotions have to do with leading and work.
It has everything to do with it. It has everything to do with it because that notion, how you communicate to something to let people feel good about themselves. You can start by just cussing them out completely, and at the end of the day, I have a classic example in a radio station where at the beginning of the first major meeting when the general manager outlined all the plans and so on, and then any questions? And the first person asked a question, he just shut it down, bang. Next person asked a question, he just shut it down, bang, foolishness. It's the next meeting after he outlined. What's that?
Say what now? He asked people if they had any questions.
Yeah, and then when they raised the question, he just shut the question down. Foolishness. Next question, foolishness. So by the next meeting, after he outlined the plans and said, any questions? Guess what the answer was? No, sir.
Nobody had anything to say.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
No questions. Because he had indicated to them that, he is not about listening. So that's another critical trait. Listen. Active listening, not just, when somebody say, I have an open door office. Yeah, man. But you go in their office and they're on the phone the whole time. They're on their computer the whole time. They don't even look up at you. They're taking 10 phone calls. But I have an open door, man. Stop by any time. No.
Yes.
When you're talking to somebody, you turn to them. You put the phone down, you turn away from the computer and you engage them so that they see and they feel that you're listening. Critical features.
Active listening.
Active listening. Very important.
All right, so we hear that. The emotional intelligence is important, the listening, the honesty, the integrity. I'm going to take, as a matter of fact, I think it's time for us to let you go. We have to let you go. All right. So before we let you go, I won't take the break yet. Right before we let you go, because we know you have a session, what are those three, if you were going to say three most dangerous traits of a leader, the ones that could most likely land them into problems, the ones that would make you a horrible leader, what would those three traits be?
I would say inconsistency. Inconsistency, because people can't predict you. They can't read you because
you're flip-flopping all over the place.
That's the word. Things like favoritism, where it is obvious that there are certain persons can do anything and get away with it, whereas some people, if they sigh, that's a problem. So that drowns you as a leader. And oftentimes,
favoritism.
And a leader who does not make hard decisions, who shies away from having hard decisions and having hard conversations. When you put off having hard conversations, the prize you win is having a harder one to make later on. There's some leaders who just don't want to. They just don't want to say the hard things. They just don't want to have those difficult conversations. If you don't, you create more problems for yourself later on.
So failure to lead, failure to take hard decisions, favoritism, and inconsistency. Those you say are the three most dangerous ones.
Absolutely.
All right, Doug, I'm so sorry you have to go so quick because I feel like I'm just getting into the conversation.
I'm sure we can do this again another time.
Yes. It was so great talking to you.
My pleasure.
All the best with your session.
Okay, then. Bye-bye.
Thank you much.